You protected my child. Now you belong to me." The Cherokee woman's words echoed through the mountain hollow, and Thomas Reed felt his carefully constructed world of solitude crumbling. He'd just shared a can of beans with a starving girl, his last meal. And now her mother stood before him invoking ancient tribal laws he didn't understand. 34 years he'd spent alone, drifting from town to town, belonging to nobody. Now this fierce woman with determined eyes was claiming him as family, binding him with obligations older than the mountains themselves. Thomas could walk away. He'd always walked away. But something in the little girl's trusting eyes, in the mother's unwavering gaze, made him hesitate, and in that hesitation everything changed. The great smoky mountains wore autumn like a crown of fire, maple trees blazing red and gold against deep green pines. Thomas Reed sat beside a narrow creek, nursing a small fire and watching his last can of beans heat in the flames. He was 34, lean and weathered, with the look of a man who'd been traveling his entire life without ever arriving anywhere that mattered. Thomas had no family, never really had. His mother died birthing him in a Kansas orphanage, his father's name a mystery. He'd been passed between families who needed farmhands more than they wanted children. By 16, he'd struck out on his own, working cattle drives and lumber camps, always moving, always alone. But lately, the loneliness had teeth. He'd watched too many men his age settle down, build homes, raise children. Now, camped in these ancient mountains, with winter approaching and his money nearly gone, Thomas wondered if perpetual motion was really freedom or just another kind of prison. The beans were bubbling when he heard it, a soft whimper, barely audible over the creek's chatter. Thomas found her 20 yards downstream, half hidden behind a fallen oak, a Cherokee girl, maybe 7 years old, with enormous dark eyes in a face that was all sharp angles and hollow cheeks. Her dress was torn, her feet bare and bleeding. "Hey there," Thomas said softly, lowering himself to one knee. "You hurt?" The girl didn't answer, but her eyes flickered to his campfire, to the beans, with hunger so profound it made Thomas's chest ache. "You hungry?" The girl nodded once. "Well, I got beans cooking, more than enough for two. You want to share?" The girl ate like she hadn't seen food in days. Probably hadn't. Thomas gave her the entire can, his last meal until he reached the next town 3 days' ride away. He watched her eat, not regretting it for a second. "What's your name?" he asked when she'd finished. "Ayita," she whispered. "It means first to dance." "That's real pretty. I'm Thomas." He added sticks to the fire. "Where's your family, Ayita?" Tears welled in those dark eyes. "Mama went to find food, told me to wait, but I got so hungry and I walked and then I was lost." Her voice broke. "I've been out here 2, maybe 3 days." Before Thomas could respond, footsteps crashed through underbrush. A woman burst through the trees. Ayita's mother, he knew immediately. Same dark eyes, same delicate features. She was perhaps 30, with long black hair and clothing that spoke of Cherokee tradition mixed with frontier practicality. "Ayita!" The woman fell to her knees, gathering the girl into her arms, speaking rapid Cherokee between sobs of relief. Thomas stepped back, giving them space, but the woman's eyes found him, and in them he saw recognition and fierce determination. She stood, still holding Ayita. "You fed her. She says you gave her your last food." "Wasn't nothing," Thomas said, uncomfortable. "Child was hungry. It was everything." The woman's voice carried weight Thomas didn't understand yet. "In our ways, there are laws older than the white man's treaties. You saved my daughter's life. You gave life when you could have walked past. Do you understand what this means?" Thomas felt unease prickle. "Ma'am, I just shared some beans." "You protected my child," the woman interrupted, her voice ringing with authority. "You fed her when she was starving, sheltered her when she was lost. By the old laws, by the covenant of our ancestors, you are now bound to us. You belong to this family. You belong to me." Thomas stared at her, certain he'd misunderstood. "Ma'am, I'm just a drifter passing through. My name is Amma. It means water. And you misunderstand. This is not sentiment. This is law, sacred obligation." Her dark eyes held his. "Tell me, Thomas Reed, where is your family? Where do you go when winter comes? Who waits for you?" The question struck deeper than Thomas wanted to admit. "I don't have family, never did. You do now." Amma's voice softened. "Whether you accept it or not." Every instinct screamed at Thomas to politely extract himself and ride away. He'd spent 34 years avoiding exactly this kind of entanglement. But Ayita was watching him with those enormous eyes, and something in her gaze made his chest tight. "This is crazy," Thomas said, but his voice lacked conviction. "This is family, and family is always a little crazy. Come, our village is 2 hours' walk. You will stay with us, at least through the winter." "I don't take charity. It is not charity. It is obligation. You saved my daughter. I am bound by honor to provide for you as family." Amma shifted Ayita to her other hip. "And you have nowhere else to go." The truth settled in Thomas's stomach like a stone. His money was almost gone. Winter was coming. He'd been planning to head south, find work, keep moving. But to what? "Just through winter," he heard himself saying. "Then I'm back on the road." Amma's smile was knowing. "We shall see." The Cherokee village sat in a mountain hollow where 3 creeks converged, perhaps 30 families living in log cabins. Amma's home was modest, shared with Ayita, her elderly mother Elise, and teenage nephew Wire, who eyed Thomas with suspicion. The first weeks were awkward. Thomas helped with firewood and repairs, hunted to contribute meat. The village accepted him cautiously. But Thomas felt like an outsider, constantly aware he didn't belong. Except Ayita didn't see him that way. She followed him everywhere, chattering in her mix of Cherokee and English, teaching him words while he taught her to whittle. She'd climb onto his lap during evening meals, unconsciously trusting. "You are good with her," Amma observed one evening. "Her father died 2 years ago. She has not laughed like this since." Thomas watched Ayita through the window, something fierce and protective rising in his chest. "The world isn't safe for children." "No, which is why family matters." Amma paused in her work. "You still plan to leave in spring?" Thomas meant to say yes, but what came out was, "I don't know anymore." Christmas came with heavy snow. Thomas found himself part of it all, helping prepare food, joining songs, watching Ayita's joy at the wooden doll he'd carved her. On Christmas night, Amma sat beside Thomas. "My grandmother watches you. She said you have the eyes of someone who has been looking for home his whole life without knowing what he was searching for. She said you have finally found it, but you are too afraid to stay." Thomas's throat tightened. "I don't know how to be family. Never learned. Family is not something you are born knowing. It is something you build, day by day, choice by choice." Spring arrived slowly, snow melting to reveal tender green shoots. Thomas had spent the winter working alongside the village, and somewhere along the way, people had stopped treating him like an outsider. They'd started calling him Tsiu Canoe because he'd come drifting, but chosen to stay anchored. The choice crystallized one morning in early April. Thomas was teaching Ayita to identify animal tracks when she grabbed his hand suddenly. "Edoda," she said simply. "Father." Thomas froze, understanding the Cherokee word, grasping the enormity of what she was offering. "Ayita, I'm not—" He stopped. Wasn't he, though? He'd been there every day for 6 months, teaching her, protecting her, loving her in ways he hadn't known he was capable of. "Edoda," Ayita repeated, more confident, smiling up at him with complete trust. "Yeah," Thomas whispered, his voice breaking. "Yeah, little one. Edoda." That evening, Thomas found Amma preparing garden beds. "Ayita called me father today," he said without preamble. Amma's hands stilled. "And what did you say?" "I said yes, because it's true. Because you all became my family, real family, the kind I never had but always wanted. And what does that mean for spring, for your plans to keep drifting?" Thomas looked at the cabin, at the mountains that had become familiar, the village that had become home. "It means I'm staying, if you'll have me, not as obligation or ancient law, but as choice. Because I want to be here, because I want to be Ayita's father." Amma's smile was radiant. "The law that bound you here was ancient and sacred. But what keeps you here is something even older, love, the choice to belong." She stepped closer. "You protected my child, and in doing so, you found yourself." Thomas pulled her close, and for the first time in his 34 years, he felt the bone-deep certainty of home. Not a place, but people. Not obligation, but choice. That summer, Thomas married Amma. He learned to speak fluent Cherokee, taught Ayita to ride horses, became part of the village in ways that went beyond law or tradition. Years later, Ayita would tell her children the story of how her father came to them, the drifter who shared his last meal with a lost child, and discovered that sometimes the family you choose is more powerful than the one you're born into. And Thomas would think about all those years spent wandering, looking for something he couldn't name. He'd been searching for home. He'd found it the moment a Cherokee woman said, "You belong to me." Not as possession, but as belonging. Not as capture, but as finally being found.